Hello, welcome back to another video. So, in this one, it's going to be a masterclass on how to heal your anxious attachment. It's going to be a very in-depth video. It's going to be a very practical video. If you have like a notebook, whatever, grab your pen and take some notes. All right. So, first of all, who am I, right? Basically, I'm a person who is going to tell you how to heal your anxious attachment, right? I'm just a person who experienced a bunch of mistakes throughout my life, especially in relationships with attachments. And in this video, I'm just going to be giving you a very in-depth guide on how to actually heal it. So in your next relationship, you're going to be able to actually overcome what we call the anxious attachment, and you're going to move from anxious attachment to secure attachment. All right. So number one, what does anxious attachment and what does it actually mean? Okay. The core definition of it is basically a relational survival strategy, not a personality flaw, nor a character weakness, and not a permanent identity. It is a pattern way of the nervous system that learned to maintain closeness and safety with early attachment figures when that safety felt unreliable, inconsistent, and conditional. At its root, anxious attachment is the body's answer to a repeated, unresolved question, which goes like, am I lovable enough to be kept? Right? Try to put that and embrace it in your mind. Perhaps you're asking the same question as well. Now, anxious attachment isn't about being too much. It's about the nervous system, right? The CNS, the central nervous system, that learned love is never guaranteed. So it's like up and down, it's fluctuating. So let's talk about the foundation so you really understand how the attachment works within your body. So there's a book on attachment by John Bowlby, right? I don't know how to pronounce his name. Bowlby, right? John Bowlby's attachment theory, which tells us that human beings are wired for proximity or closeness to caregivers. As infants, our entire survival depends on emotional attunement and physical closeness. The attachment system is a biological imperative, not a psychological preference. So it's not a preference, it is actually the thing that we need to. We have to get close, we have to be in proximity, or we have to be near or close to our caregivers, your parents, your older siblings, any elders that were around you when you were a kid. When caregivers are consistently attuned, right, the child develops what is called secure base, right? Secure base, a felt sense that I am safe, I am loved. When I reach out, someone will be there. This becomes a template for all future relationships, which is good, right? If you have a secure base, meaning you have a secure attachment, but you're watching this video because you don't recently or currently like hold that. When caregivers are inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes intrusive, the child's nervous system cannot relax into safety. Instead, it learns to stay on high alert, to monitor the caregiver's emotional state, like papa, mama, like without saying it, either directly or indirectly. You're always going to be like hyper vigilance towards your mom and dad. You're always going to be like, are they okay? Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they mad at me? Are they happy? Right? And to become highly reactive to any signal of withdrawal or disapproval. So when your parents is actually withdrawing or they actually disapprove you, now you're actually being reactive because now you're like, so they don't love me or they love me, right? That is the birth of the anxious attachment. So here's a key distinction for the anxiety disorders, right? Anxious attachment is not the same as anxiety disorder. Now, if you have anxiety disorder, you can still watch this video, but just know that it's not for you because they often co-occur. It is specifically relational, between relationship from human to human, right? Most intensely in intimate, vulnerable connection. So that's why when you are single, right, you are not, your wounds aren't really triggered your anxious attachment aren't really, it's not really manifesting. It's not really, it stays dormant until you are in a relationship. That's when it explodes like the volcano, right? That's when it activates. That's when your wounds activates and your anxious attachment is actually expressed when you are in relationship with someone that is actually mirroring back that familiar experience where you felt like you were anxious in the past. A person can be highly functional, confident, and successful in work and still have a deeply anxious attachment style in relationship, just like I said before. So, before that, let's just talk about the internal experience of it. So, from the inside, anxious attachment feels like a constant low hum of a threat underneath connection. It's the part that is always scanning. Are they pulling away? Did that text mean something, right? If perhaps one of your partners is like testing something that make you anxious, make you worry or something in your head, you will always think about that belief, like, did that text mean something? Did I do wrong? Why haven't they responded yet? Am I too much? Not enough? About to be left? What is it, right? You're too hyper vigilance. It is not a drama though. It is not neediness. This is the nervous system that learns through real experience that love is fragile and that closeness requires constant maintenance and vigilance. Vigilance, right? Like being aware of certain things. And hypervigilance means you're doing that action but a little bit too much. The anxious attached person is not weak. Whoa. There was a thunder. Sorry if you can hear that in the background. I'm in an apartment, so it's like, car passes by and whatnot, and the weather. It's been raining. It's been raining here. I'm not gonna tell you my location where, but it's been raining. So, the attached person is not weak. You're not weak. In many ways, they are extraordinarily attuned to others. They're highly empathetic. They're deeply relational. Often the person in a room who senses everyone else's emotional state first. So if you like go in a room with a bunch of your friends or your partner is there, or it's like a family gathering, do you sometimes try to, no, you don't try, but do you sometimes unintentionally just notice, just like click of a finger, you notice if that person is like being sad, or if that person is being left out, or if that person is mad or angry? Do you notice their emotional state? Because if you do, then there might be some chances that those are the signs or the markers of you being actually anxiously attached. Just like another additional like signs to support your own statement that you are anxiously attached. This is the shadow gift of the wound. So being like that does not mean being like empathetic, deeply relational with a person does not mean that is bad, because you have an anxious attachment which you express to your partner and then it sabotaged your like life, your relationships. It is not merely a mistake. It's not merely a disadvantage for you. It's also a gift from the wound. It's the shadow gift, the parts that you dislike, but it can also turn into a gift. 50-50. The capacity was born from necessity, but it can become a genuine superpower when the survival posture underneath it is healed. So, a brief story, right? Around 2 years ago, I was in a relationship where I felt like this is the one, right? Because of a different religion, long distance relationship, I then decided myself to actually separate with her. She was lovely, she was the best partner ever. Even when I was still unconscious of any pattern I was repeating, right? It was a very, I don't say toxic dynamic, but there were things that I bring up, or I projected my own shadow into her, but we both didn't realize it because we just want to be with each other, right? Things were all right, because I didn't know, I wasn't conscious of anything, but little did I know there was an attachment issue on top of that. It looks so all right in a surface level. I mean, everyone was just saying that we were adorable and whatnot. I remember the moments when we were walking on the side of the beach, or talking at campus, going on a date to a mall. There would be a conversation at least once a week about her constantly on hypervigilance when she isn't with me, or actually when she is with me as well, because she thinks that I will leave her on some point. She keeps asking if things were alright, asking if I love her, asking about why I did not text her for so long. I used to get annoyed at that, so I sort of became the avoidant one slightly, right? Because if there's an avoidant, there's an anxious one, there would always be an avoidant one if the person isn't really conscious of what attachment they have or what patterns are they repeating. One person cannot go into a secure attachment if both of them are not conscious. So if the other person is anxious, then the other person is most certainly avoidant. So I became the avoidant one, right? Slightly. She had the anxious attachment embodied in her beliefs. Her thoughts revolved around myself wanting to leave her for another girl, not texting her, me being mad at her for something when I'm actually not. Sometimes I was the anxious one, but it was mostly her, right? Now, being an anxiously attached person does not mean that you are anxiously attached in all relationships. You might become actually the avoidant one when you're placed in a relationship where the other person has a stronger intensity or stronger level of anxiety. Not anxiety disorder, but relational anxiety. But anxious attachment, it's like more stronger because perhaps the wound is more bigger, more stronger than yourself. Therefore, it will like out surpass your own anxious attachment level. Perhaps you will be the avoidant one then. So I feel like myself that I'm also anxiously attached, but in that relationship, I was more of avoidant rather than anxiously attached because she had more anxiously attached level intensity rather than mine. Okay? Now this got me thinking about who I was with her in a relationship. Was I the person that was very furious at her, very mad at her, right? And I think back and I'm like, yeah, I was. I used to always get mad at whatever she says, therefore she's anxious of it. Perhaps that familiar experience, it was triggered when she was in childhood, and that's why she's anxiously attached with me. On why she became who she was in a relationship, anxious. So, just a brief story for you to understand how this works, and perhaps you can also relate to it as well. So, let's talk about some manifestation, right? Where does the anxious attachment actually show up in real life? So, anxious attachment does not live in the abstract, right? It shows up every day as behaviors, as thoughts, as bodily sensation, and relational dynamics that play out every single day. Understanding manifestation is the first step toward helping yourself see your pattern without shame. So, in romantic relationships, where perhaps you're watching this video because of it, so hypervigilance, right? That's one of them, is hypervigilance to emotional cues. The anxiously attached person develops a finely tuned radar for a shift in their partner's emotional state. Let's say a delayed text, a different tone of voice, a distracted look, all of it gets processed as a potential threat. This hypervigilance is exhausting, very exhausting, but automatic. It was literally a survival skill that you developed during your childhood. Protest behaviors. When they sense distance or disconnection, the anxious attacher activates what John Bowlby called protest behaviors. You see? Protest behaviors, which are attempts to re-establish proximity. Because if you're anxious, of course you would want to be close every single time because that's what you think love is like. Being close every single time, being in proximity to the significant other every single time. Now this not only shows up in relationship as well, romantic, but it also shows up in friendship. It also shows up with your family, right? This can look like excessive talking or calling, picking arguments to actually generate emotional contact. I realize how, like, back then, like the partner that I was with 2 years ago, she was actually picking arguments for some reason to generate emotional contact, and then I got mad by that, and then suddenly I am the one who's picking arguments now because of her, and it's all fine because negative contact is contact. Whatever the anxiously attached person, can do to create contact, even though it's negative, the person will chase for it. Withdrawing suddenly to see if the partner will chase, making threats of leaving without actually intending to, dramatizing or escalating emotions to get a response. Note here, these behaviors are not manipulative at their core. They are the nervous system trying desperately to restore the felt sense of secure connection, but even though they have anxiously attached, the intention is actually safety seeking, right? The strategy is dysregulated. Because the strategy is dysregulated, you cannot go from an anxiously base to a secure base. So, the third one is reassurance seeking. There's a constant need for verbal or physical reassurance. Things like, "Do you love me? Are we okay? You're not mad at me, right?" Even when given a reassurance, it does not often land or hold. I realize this as well. The nervous system can't take it in because the wound lives below cognition. There's a wound under it, under the unconscious, that we have to bring out to the light, that we have to bring to the conscious, right? You can tell someone they are loved 100 times, and the anxious part still won't believe it until the body learns it's safe. If you know, like, and you can relate to perhaps your partner telling you that she loves you 100 times, and you still cannot believe it, then you are anxiously attached. And I also can relate to it, because when I told her that I actually love her 100 times, she still does not believe it because she doesn't feel it, right? Fourth one is the preoccupied mind. The mind becomes obsessively focused on the relationship in and of itself, replaying conversations, imagining abandonment scenarios, interpreting neutral events as negative signs. This is sometimes called preoccupied attachment in adult attachment literature. If you can read the books from it, it is called preoccupied attachment. The mental bandwidth consumed is very enormous. Lastly is the emotional fusion. The anxious attacher often loses themselves in a relationship. Their mood becomes entirely dependent on the other person's mood, right? Anxious. They don't know what they need because they've spent their whole life tracking what the other person needs, and this is pretty bad because they don't know what they need. Their identity becomes relational rather than autonomous. Very, very important, that last bit. So we're going to be talking about other things that you can see manifested for their anxious attachment. So the second one is in the body. This is very important. Anxious attachment is not psychological. It lives in the nervous system and the body. Things like chronic tightness in the chest or throat when a person is emotionally unavailable, racing heart or shallow breathing when reading a cold text, right? Gut level dread at the prospect of being abandoned, difficulty sleeping when in relational conflict, very, very important. And I think you can relate to this as well, yourself or the person that you've been with. Compulsive checking behaviors, phone, email, social media, whatnot. Freeze or collapse response when the partner becomes emotionally distant. This is the nervous system response, which is sympathetic. When the nervous system is not at rest, freezing or collapsing is a very, very common response when an actually attached person is triggered by a person that is emotionally distant. So the third one is it is manifested in work and performance. Now for men out there, this is very important because you don't only can ruin your life or sabotage your life in romantic relationships or families or friends, but you also need to know how your work and performance can be very important for you to actually excel even more in your purpose and in your passion, in your work, in your career, if you're still an anxiously attached person. While anxious attachment is most visible in romantic relationships, it also colors professional life. Intense fear over criticism or disapproval from authority figures, overperforming to earn love and safety, confusing achievement with worthiness, right? Difficulty setting limits with bosses if you're working in a job, or colleagues for fear of rejection, chronic people pleasing, very important. I have people pleasing, right? So that means I'm both avoidant and anxious. That leads to resentment and burnout. And then lastly, seeking constant validation from mentors or supervisors. If you have a mentor, if you have a coach that is helping you on your business, then it is very important for you to see if you actually seek constant validation from that person or not. That determine if you have an actually attachment, right? So in friendship and in social dynamics, it looks like reading into silences or cancel plan as a personal rejection. So if your friend canceled like the plans 5 minutes before you go, and then now you can't do anything about it, you see it as a personal rejection. You see it as that person not liking you at all, and you're triggered. Second thing is feeling like a burden yet also needing a lot of emotional closeness. Third one is difficulty expressing needs directly instead of hinting and hoping others intuit them, right? If you just don't say what you need, then the others don't know what you need, and then once the others doesn't give you what you need, then you blame it on them because you don't tell them, which is very weird, right? Yes and no, because you're actually attached. How can you do a certain thing, right? That's what safety looks like. So you must actually take responsibility of yourself in this exact pattern or attachment. High sensitivity to feeling left out or excluded. And lastly, overgiving, then feeling depleted and unreciprocated. So the inner narrative, which is the limiting beliefs. Underneath all the behaviors are core beliefs, the beliefs that you must remove in order for you to step out of being anxiously attached. So it is often pre-verbal that drive the pattern. Things like, I'm too much, I'm not enough, people I love always leave, love is something I have to earn. If they really knew me, they wouldn't stay. I need to monitor this relationship or it will fall apart. And lastly, my needs are a burden to others. The anxious attacher does not need to be fixed. They need to be met by their own nervous system first. Right? We're not here to fix, we're not here to remove, we're here to hold and build capacity in order to us to feel the discomfort so we can overcome the anxious attachment. So just disregard this first because I'm going to be talking about the original wound. So the original wound, okay, it is where the anxious attachment is actually born. To truly heal anxious attachment, we must go back to where it began, not to assign blame to caregivers, but to understand the original context in which the strategy made perfect sense. So, attachment theory and early wounding, right? I think every single person in this world needs to know, parents as well, right? That you need to know on how to like the base knowledge on the original wound, because here's the thing, right? A lot of parents just go out and just do parenting without actually learning attachment theory or wounding and whatnot. What this will do is they will traumatize their children. Unintentionally, unconsciously, they will do it, and what their children will go through is trauma in the future, and they will sabotage their life because of this trauma. And who wants that, right? That's one of the purpose. That's what I'm also passionate about. So I think every single person in this world, they need to understand the attachment styles. They need to understand how early wounding works so they can become the parent that is fulfilling, and they don't have to pass on this intergenerational trauma onto their kids, right? So we can start here, start early, start our healing journey early in order for us to not do that in the future. So attachment styles are formed in the first 12 to 18 months of life and reinforced through childhood. The primary driver of anxious attachment is inconsistent caregiving. This is the primary driver, right? If you just take out anything from this video, is this inconsistent caregiving. So in order to do that, in order to go back to it, to not be inconsistent, you have to be consistent, okay? It just makes sense. So sometimes the need gets met, sometimes the need doesn't. The child has no reliable way to predict which it will be. This inconsistency is the key, right? It's not pure neglect, which tends to produce avoidant attachment, and it's not consistent attunement, which produces security. It's the unpredictability that trains the nervous system to stay permanently activated, because relaxing might mean missing the window when love is available. Repeat that after me. It's the unpredictability that trains the nervous system to stay permanently activated, because if you relax, you might miss the window when love is available. Think of it like a slot machine. That's why I put a picture here, right? Intermittent reinforcement, the reward. Love attunement comes unpredictability, which makes the behavior, anxious monitoring, extraordinarily hard to extinguish, right? It's a slot machine, right? It does not, it's not like, you know what I mean, right? Hold on, my camera is heating up. I have to like get rid of the charger first. So these are some common childhood environments that create anxious attachment. The emotionally inconsistent parent. So a parent who is loving and warm one moment, distracted or emotionally withdrawn the next, that is a very emotionally inconsistent parent. It often due to a malaise, depression, stress, unprocessed trauma of themselves, their own attachment wounds. But to the child, this registers as, I never know when I'll get love, so I can never stop looking for it, right? Next is the enmeshed or anxious parent. A parent whose emotional needs become the child's responsibility. The child learns that to read and regulate the parent's emotions above their own. This trains hypervigilance, like I mentioned before, empathy as survival, and a deep fear that their own needs are secondary or dangerous to express. Loss, abandonment, or inconsistent presence. A parent who is physically absent, work, travel, separation, or emotionally absent because of addiction, mental illness, emotionally unavailability. The child's nervous system encodes, people leave, I have to hold on tight. And then lastly, which is, conditional love, fluctuating love. Love that was given based on your performance, behavior, or emotional compliance. I love you when you behave. I love you when you're smart. I love you when you get an A grade on your test, right? Good children don't cry. You're not being too sensitive. So this children learns that love is earned, not inherent. This becomes the deepest root of the wound, the belief that they are not inherently worthy of love at all, that love is conditional. You need to give unconditional love to your own child, right? And if you don't get that, it's going to be hard for you. Developmental deficits. Sometimes the wound isn't one moment, right? It's not like sexual abuse or whatever. That's just like a one moment thing. Developmental needs that simply never got met, right? They need to be seen and mirrored. Things like, I see you, I understand you. They need to be soothed and co-regulated. Things like, you're okay, I've got you. The need for safe expression of emotion. Things like, including the difficult ones. The need to be celebrated for being, not only doing, just being you, right? Lastly is the need for consistent, reliable presence that does not require management. Now, I think developmental deficit is for people who does not have the three core developmental needs, which are unconditional love, unconditional validation, and to know that your parents is okay. And if you don't get that, you develop the developmental deficits. So there's a shadow that forms here, right? If you know the book Shadow Work, right, from Jungian psychology, the knowledge behind this, the shadow contains everything that was rejected, suppressed, or shamed. For the anxiously attached person, the shadow often holds their anger, because anger was too dangerous to express, right? It might have caused abandonment if you express anger. Their needs, because needs were quote unquote too much or went unmet. Their authentic self, because the performance who they had to be to get love eclipsed who they actually were. Their grief, the uncried tears for consistent love they never got. This is the shadow, that the parts that they dislike. Until these shadow parts are integrated, the person continues to be driven by them unconsciously. The rage shows up as passive aggression or sudden explosions. The grief shows up as depression or emotional numbness. The authentic self shows up as a chronic dissatisfaction always searching, never arriving. So note here, the wound was actually adaptive, right? You always have to hold to this. The anxious strategy worked. It was the most intelligent response to an inconsistent environment during your childhood, because the goal of healing is not to erase your own pattern, but is to make it optional in order for you to actually hold it, right? When I said before, I've mentioned building capacity. Your nervous system needs to know that you weren't broken, you just adapted, and now we're updating the software. So, let's get to the part where you know now the knowledge, and I'm going to show you on how to actually heal it, okay? And not just understand it in your own head. Understanding the wound is the entry point, but understanding alone rarely heals, right? You cannot just understand and you will heal, because the work must go behind the cortex, beneath the cortex, into the body, the nervous system, the implicit memory, right? And the parts of the self that are still living in the original wound. You cannot just understand it all in your head. Your body must be updated. Your nervous system must be updated in order for you to actually heal this anxious attachment. Because these are not steps in a linear sequence, they are actually layers, often revisited in a spiral as deeper levels of the wound surface over time. So let's get it. Layer 1 is awareness, which is actually naming the pattern. Before anything else, you need to see their pattern clearly. You need to see your own pattern clearly, compassionately, and without shame. This is not cognitive analysis, this is actually witnessing. What this looks like is like basically mapping your relational history, noticing the recurring themes, identifying the specific attachment behaviors, things like protest behaviors, reassurance seeking, and fusion. Then you can also trace those behaviors back to their earliest moments of feeling unsafe in love, like grief. Then you can also embrace the concept of the wound as an adaptive reframing shame into understanding. So you have to kind of like slow down here, because most anxious attachers have thought about their patterns obsessively. But remember, thinking is not witnessing. You have to guide yourself. You have to guide them, like your parts, to feel into the pattern, then analyze it in your head. So layer number 2 is the nervous system work. You have to build regulation. You have to build capacity. This is the foundational and non-negotiable. The anxious attachment is a nervous system state at first, a cognitive pattern second. You cannot think your way out of your nervous system response. You have to feel it, because the body must learn safety, not your mind learning safety, right? You first have to understand the dysregulation in an anxious attachment. The anxious attacher typically oscillates between two nervous system states. First is sympathetic dominance, which is like hyperactivation, hypervigilance, anxiety, urgency, emotional reactivity, and protest behaviors. Secondly, it's the collapse/freeze, which is your dorsal vagal, right? You don't have to know or memorize these terms, but you just have to understand. Things like shutting down after prolonged distress, emotional numbness, depression, and disconnection. So the goal of the nervous system work is actually to expand what Peter Levine, right? Peter Levine, you just search up the author, very, very good book. He has like a bunch of books on trauma and somatic healing and a bunch of that. And Debdana called the window of tolerance, right? You have to understand this window of tolerance. It is a zone where the person can feel strongly without being swept away. So whenever you feel it, right, you're not there to just like shut down and whatever. You can actually feel it without shutting down. And you can also be close with it without activating the threat response. Hence, you're building capacity to feel the discomfort of the anxious somatic manifestations. So these are just some core practices for regulation during and not during when you are, I think I might have deleted this, but basically it says here during the moment and not during the moment as well, of like triggers. So you can also do somatic grounding, feet on the floor, hand on the chest, orienting the gaze slowly around the room, all engage the ventral vagal system, which you're signaling safety into your body. You can also do breath work, right? Extending the exhale. Because longer out breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that is resting, that is regulated, that is breathing. And you can also do coherent breathing, even though I think the parasympathetic, the longer out breath, is more effective than coherent breathing. So there's also two things, titration and pendulation. This is when you are actually going deep inside into the grieving work, where you can use this like certain tool. Approaching the emotional material in small doses rather than flooding, like slowly turning up heat versus jumping into boiling water. So you can also do pendulation, right? If you know the physics, pendulation, you're just basically moving between the distress sensation and the resource, something that feels safe, feels good, for neutral in the body, which teaches the nervous system that it can come back from activation. So like during moments when you're perhaps arguing and you're anxiously attached, and then you feel these like triggers in your body, this is some of the tools where you can redirect your own like activation threat to, like, so because you're activated, you can do breath work, you can do somatic grounding, perhaps you can stay out of the room first and come back, or you can do it in the moment as well, right? And the last one is just actually like in general, you have to track your body sensation. Learning to name what's happening in the body in real time, like tightness, flutter, constriction, it builds the interoceptive awareness and interrupts the automatic escalation or anxiety. Or we can also call it the ANS, the automatic nervous system. Sorry, autonomic nervous system, right? So whenever you receive danger, it straight away signals into your body that there's danger. But when you track your body sensation, you're separating yourself from that feeling of anxiety, because it's only a part of yourself, from your actually self. So you're like an observer, right? You're like looking at like an eagle eyes view over like in the sky or something, but over your own parts. So when you build capacity over time, right, you will heal, but it cannot be linear. It needs to be exponential, and it cannot be rushed. The capacity to tolerate emotional intimacy, uncertainty, and the temporary absence of a partner must be incrementally the same way you build muscles in gym, right? Each session is a rep. Each moment of staying regulated when the old pattern would have been escalated is the neural pathway of being rewired. So layer 3 is actually parts work, right? So then you want to meet the anxious part. Hold on a second, I want to drink. My throat is getting dry. It's almost late. Hope you're seeing this as a very valuable video, right? If not, it's okay. If yes, then subscribe, because I take a long time to make these videos. So layer number 3 is actually parts work. It is actually when you meet the anxious part of yourself. From the book, right? I read the book as well, and you should too. The IFS, the internal family system, is very, very common in the world of healing. And the ego state therapy gives us a very powerful framework here. The anxious attachment pattern is not a whole person, right? Like I said before, it's only a part of them. A young, scared part that is doing its best from keeping them being abandoned. The process, it can go something like identifying the anxious part. When does it activate? What does it look like, feel like? What age does it feel like, right? You have to really get curious rather than get critical, because you might initially hate the part of themselves, but the work here is to build compassionate relationship with it. You have to see like, okay, the part of me back then that was anxious, it was built from a trauma, and because the body is trying to protect itself from danger, it builds up a defense mechanism, and the defense mechanism being triggered in the present moment, I have to be compassionate with it. Thank you for protecting me from it back then. Thank you for protecting me from the trauma I couldn't handle back then, right? Because My adult self weren't there for the child. My nervous system was there, but my nervous system cannot handle it like how we can handle it today. Ask the part what it's afraid of. It almost always answers with the original wound. Things like, if I let you stop monitoring, then you'll get abandoned, right? Then you can also introduce self energy. In if's term, the calm, grounded adult presence, the one that we want, the one that who we are today, into the relationship with the part, so the part isn't running the show alone. Because over time, you're helping the part update. It's protecting a child that no longer needs to be protected in the same way. So you don't heal the anxious part by fighting with it. You heal it by finally giving it what it actually needs: presence, safety, and acknowledgement. So layer 4 is regression, right? And developmental needs. Regression meaning, the definition in Google, it's basically going back into an undeveloped or the original state. That's what regression means. Some wounds require going back, not just talking about the past, but actually going back to it experientially, right? This is very, very sensitive to a lot of people, so you need to have a safe container to allow you to access that original emotional state and receive, often for the first time, what you needed but didn't get. So, developmental deficits that need reparenting. These are the unmet needs from your childhood that you've been unconsciously seeking in adult relationships. I think I've already mentioned this before, but this is, just like additional info for you. Things like mirroring, attunement, safe expression, consistent presence, and the celebration of being. You can read that first, but I'm gonna continue talking. So, how reparenting works in practice? It means you have to facilitate those inner child dialogues, right? The adult self learning to offer what the child never received. You have to talk with it. You can do it like verbally, like talk, or you just do it inside, like mentally, right? You can also do guided visualization where where did I put client here? Where it's not where the client, basically where you, right? I mean, if you were my client, then I can help you with this, where you return to a wound memory and you receive a different response. Then we can also do somatic reparenting: hand on the heart, warm voice, gentle presence. The body receives what the child needs through therapeutic relationship in and of itself. The reparenting part right here, it's a very highly sensitive work that you need someone else for you to actually be guided in this practice, in this work. But for the rest, you can do it slowly by slowly, because then we don't want to risk you getting more trauma, but we want to actually go ahead and actually heal, right? But if you need any help on doing this, if you actually want to get into the work and not just understand it and actually be with it and learn it, then you can DM me on Instagram if you want, at Zufaro Descent, and we can talk about whatever that you want to do and whatever your pattern that you want to remove is. Note here, this layer require a strong container, like I mentioned before, and high degree of trust. It should not be rushed. You need to have enough nervous system capacity before going deep into regression work. Otherwise, the session becomes re-traumatizing rather than actually healing. This is also included within the grief work as well. So you doing this is actually you grieving as well. So layer 5 is what actually got buried. This is where the work goes underground. The shadow, in Jungian terms, holds everything that was exiled, not because it was bad, but because it was too dangerous or too painful to keep it in the light. So remember, if you know Jungian psychology, right? The shadow, the light, the unconscious, and the conscious. This is the unconscious. For the anxiously attached person, I keep on saying it the other way around. Shadow work often surfaces in the grief, the very most important work here. Beneath all the protest behaviors and hypervigilance is the ocean of grief. Grief for the consistent love that never came, for the childhood that was spent managing an adult's emotional state instead of simply being a child, for the years spent in relationships that recreated the original wound. The grief needs to move, not be fixed, not be reframed, just felt, right? Grief in the body tends to live in the chest and the throat. You have to allow yourself to actually wail, cry, without rushing yourself back to the inside, back to your what you think. You want to let it move through you. It's often the only right thing to say to yourself in order to do this. Next, we have the anger. Underneath the grief, almost always, it is rage. Because the anxious attacher suppressed anger. Because anger felt like the most likely triggered for abandonment. Things like, if I get angry, they leave. So it went underground and came out sideways as passive aggression, self-blame, depression, or explosive outbursts that feel very disproportionate. Now, anger work is critical. This is also included in grief work as well. Not venting, not channeling, things like pushing against a wall, stomping, tearing paper, just like how any child wants to be angry, right? But you cannot do this because then your parents will be like, stop doing that, This gives a body a way to complete the survival response that got frozen when the original wound actually occurred. Again, this is also grieving. The authentic self. Many anxiously attached persons lose themselves in the project of becoming what they needed to be to get love. Their authentic preferences, opinions, desires, and values got suppressed in the favor of attunement to others, right? They're sacrificing their own self in order to, give love to the others. And shadow work here involves excavating who they actually are beneath the adaptation and learning to be that person without an apology. This is you changing who you are as a person. Alright. So, layer 6, right? After the emotional somatic word has cleared enough space, the cognitive layer becomes workable, not before. Trying to install new beliefs without first completing the emotional and somatic layers is like painting over rust that it won't hold, right? So the process of belief revision. You have to identify the core limiting beliefs with specificity, not just I don't feel worthy, but the exact felt statement the body carries. You have to find the earliest moment where they are associated with that belief. Where did this conclusion first get made, right? You have to bring somatic awareness to the memory. Where does it live in the body? What sensation? Then you have to introduce a counter experience to it, either through regression, parts work, or therapeutic relationship itself that gives the nervous system evidence to the contrary. Then you want to anchor in the new beliefs somatically, not just as thoughts, but as felt sense. What does it feel like in a body to be enough, to be safe, to be wanted? You can write all this in a journal book if you want. So then you have new beliefs being installed, right? My needs are valid and expressible. I can be fully myself and still be loved. Closeness does not require constant maintenance. I can tolerate distance without it meaning abandonment. I'm inherently enough, not because of what I do, but because who I am. So, layer 7, lastly, earn security with brotherhood. This is the long game. Earned security is the destination. Unlike the secure attachment that comes from a reliable attuned early environment, earned security is built through doing the work, through the accumulation of corrective emotional experiences, regulate nervous system responses, and new relational patterns. So, from the book, the author Mary Maines, there's a research that shows that adults who did not have a secure attachment in childhood could, through reflection and healing, develop what she called earned secure attachment, a security that comes not from a lucky childhood, but from having metabolized an unlucky one. This is what we're building, and it takes time. Okay? In order to update your body that secure attachment is possible, you need to be around people that are embodied in this work as well. People that give you the reference into what a secure and safe nervous system actually looks like and feels like. So here's the markers of being an earned security. The ability to feel anxiety in a relationship without being controlled by it, tolerating a partner's emotional unavailability temporarily without catastrophizing. You have expressing needs directly rather through protest behaviors, like I mentioned before. Receiving love without immediately doubting or deflecting it. Returning to a regulated state faster after activation. Shorter recovery cycles, and a stable sense of self that does not collapse in the face of a relational threat. So note here, you have to have an embodied brother with you in this journey. Anyone, right? For anxially attachers, the relationship with an embodied brother is a part of the medicine in order for you to heal this. His constant presence, his reliability, his capacity to stay regulated when you are not, all of this is reparenting in real time. You need an embodied brother to be secure base from which you can gradually explore, risk, and update your own nervous system. For you to pour all your grief into, for you to have a shoulder to lean on, for you to go into the depth of your own soul. The healing of an anxious attachment is not elimination of the need for love, it is the expansion of capacity to receive it. Subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.